We all want to be on deck. We all want to be coaching, interacting, influencing. But if you don't take time doing this piece of what you're doing, of your job, if you don't spend the time here, you're not as good as you can be in those other pieces. So this part to me is essential. This beginning slide, this drawing really spoke to me because I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to tell you some things that work for me and some things that I do. But I'm also going to tell you that those are not the only way to do things. I'm just trying to share ideas. I'm here to share and say these are things I think about and I find important. But I think there's a multitude of different ways to get to the spot that you want to be. There's different paths. We all have our different issues within our programs that we face, whether it be resources, could be pool space, could be numbers of players, could be age group. There's all kinds of different things that we face. And I think that I just want to provide you with some good ideas and maybe some good starting points to get working on a program if there's things that you haven't done. So first thing, I think you have to plan for the future, and I think you have to pay attention at the moment when you're planning. I think a lot of us can get caught on, this is what I set up, this is the schedule, this is the way it's going to go, this is exactly the way it's going to happen, and it doesn't always work that way. I think you have to be willing and ready to adjust at any moment, at any time within the plan. You have to pay attention to what's going on. The plan might be totally changed. Maybe it's by weather. Maybe it's by a cancellation of an event. There's all kinds of things that can change your plan, and you just have to be ready to adjust. One of the challenges with water polo guys that we really have to pick up, I think, is the very top of our sport is not organized. And I have proof of this because I am a part of the women's senior staff. And we found out in June, I believe, that we would be going to Siberia for our World Cup in September. Think about that for a second. At the highest level of our sport, we're finding out that the World Championships, where it's going to be hosted 3 months before it actually takes place. And does that take place in any other sport? And unfortunately, we have a habit of doing this. I also coach a collegiate team. It drives our administrators crazy that water polo coaches are scheduling their games all the way almost into their season, right after their season's over. Soccer, basketball, all these other sports, they have their games scheduled 2 years in advance, 3 years in advance. You hear it on ESPN all the time. Football teams will have head-to-head scheduled into 2025, so far in advance. And I think it's something that we're waiting for the top level to do sometimes. And I think that we need to do the work at the ground roots, bottom level, to start helping that schedule build. And we need to do some work within the coaching group to help drive that forward. So first of all, with a schedule, begin with the end in mind. I'm not sure of the origin of this, but I've heard Adam Krikorian say it about 3 times. He's repeated it 3 or 4 times. Each time we get to the beginning of a cycle, we talk about what we want it to look like. We work in 4-year blocks. What do we want to look like at the end of that? And so I do think the other thing that's important to pay attention to is, what do you want it to feel like? We don't always get to decide whether we win or lose. There's no guarantee your players are going to play at the best. You're going to coach at your best. The referee calls are going to align perfectly to create that result that you want. And that's why I think it's so important to also pay attention to how it feels as opposed to how it looks. How it looks, how do I want it to look? Well, I want my team to be standing on the first place platform, holding up the trophy, all smiling. Every single player across the board is happy. It's been a perfect scenario. That's how it's gone through. That can be different than how it feels. If it feels right and you still don't reach that result, it will still be a worthwhile experience for everyone. So I do think it's very important to pay attention to that feeling aspect of it. I think it's really important. It's funny that Jack spoke right before me, but I do think that it's really important. This is something I've learned a lot about during my time with the senior team. It is important to declare your personal and team values before you begin the process. Those should drive every decision that you make, how you schedule, what you do within your trainings. Your values drive everything. I'll go to some documents in a second. Some of those are hyperlinked to some documents just to give you some ideas. But a note to all is that I think sometimes we don't want to declare our values. We don't want to write them down. We don't want to put them out there because we're concerned that we won't, like you don't want to make a team rule that you're concerned that everyone's not going to meet the standard of that team rule or arrive to the standard of that team rule. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. You are going to fail in the application of the values that you create, and I think that's okay. I think the job is to strive for those values and go for those values. It is okay to fail at those. To me, it actually humanizes me to my athletes when I could say, hey, I'm sorry, I blew that. You know, I have this value that I'm supposed to live up to, and I didn't do it. And I heard Jack say something similar in his talk a moment ago when he was talking about the game and manipulating for those that were here, manipulating one of the young players into making a mistake. And that's a similar thing. He was able to step up and look at that and say, this is wrong, I did this wrong, and I'm going to change the way that I do it moving forward. Just yesterday, my team was playing in a tournament. They weren't playing to the capability that I thought they should have been playing to. And I called a timeout, and for the entire 2 minutes, I absolutely hammered them. Absolutely hammered them for 2 minutes straight. And during that moment, I lost control of myself for those 2 minutes, to be quite honest with you, because I was so unhappy with what was going on in the play. But since those 2 minutes were over, I have been reflecting quite a bit on that moment, and that I wasn't really living up to the personal values and expectations that I had of myself as a coach. And I do that all the time, and that's how I think I get better, and I continue to try to move forward when I take those moments and I go. So first one, I don't know if this is going to work in this way. I might have to go out of the show and back into it. I'm hoping that it will. These are all attached to Word documents and things that I've done. Okay, that's not really what I'm looking for. There it is. Oh, that's not showing to you guys. That's a bummer. All right, well, Word is open on my computer, and it's not showing to you guys, but I have several documents that I'd love to go over with you. The first is a staff values, so I'm going to read it since it's not showing on the thing. So these are my UCI women's water polo staff values. Number one is teach. Our primary responsibility is to teach our players with a mission to help them become better students, better athletes, and better people. We cannot achieve this without a consistent commitment to educate and improve ourselves. Our methods must make our players feel as if they are constantly growing and redefining themselves. This will increase their enjoyment and ultimately their productivity in all areas. Okay? Patience. In order to fulfill our mission to teach, we have to have, this is the one I failed at yesterday, by the way, we must demonstrate patience. Okay? We have many players from diverse backgrounds and varying levels of experience. We are motivated teachers, and we will have expectations and goals for each of our players. Throughout the educational process, we will experience frustrations and disappointments, but we must have the patience to allow our vision for each individual and the vision for the team as a whole take form. Okay? Our message has to be consistent, whether we deliver it once or 1,000 times. All of us in this room get tired of saying the same thing over and over again. And then what happens is someone else comes in and they say it one time, and it's someone that they haven't heard before, someone that they look up to, and they all follow that. They all follow that vision right afterwards. So those are just two of them. I'm going to continue to move on. We also have team values. I'm not going to pop that screen up because it's not going to show up for you anyway. I have the team go through and I have them create. It changes every year. I try to be creative with it. It's not always the same. In this particular instance, they created some standards. And those standards could be anything they want them to be, whether we're going to be about effort, we're going to be about synergy, we're going to be about a communicative nature. We're going to just whatever those values are, they sit down and they make a decision about how they want to be, so they own those things. And I think that is really important for them. Oh, no, I'm not in PowerPoint anymore. Sorry, I'm not great with the computer. Annual plan. So this is the first part. So I really like this, this circular graph here that goes through. So starting with the very first time you sit down and you have a new program, in my opinion, you should sit down and you should write a plan. So if you're a college coach, if you're a club coach, if you're a high school coach, generally your schedule is the same every year. You might like to think, oh yeah, that maybe the Cal Cup switch weekends and they're not the same, but your schedule is the same. You are going to have Cal Cup, you are going to have your summer tournaments, JOs, you're going to have Champions Cup in the fall. You're going to have, my college years look the same every single year. I mean, yes, I switch games around, but they're the same. So you can create a mass plan that takes you through an entire year and says, this is what a year is going to look like for our program. And if you do that, and this is a painful process, this takes weeks to do. This takes hours and hours upon hours of refining this and going through it. It takes a long time to get it done. But if you do that the first time, you now have the opportunity to improve within each year. If you have to sit down every year and go, okay, what's the plan for the year? And you don't already have a template that you've worked for and that you've created, it's going to become really, really challenging to get better off of what last year's template if you're just trying to recreate it every single year. You should create a mass template and improve upon it each year, okay, as you go through. So I have 3 things. Again, I will share it since they're not popping up. I'll share these with anyone. This worked when I did it with my own connection, but it's not working here. So all of these are in Word. We have a team handbook. Our team handbook is about 40 pages long. Okay, this talks about all of our expectations, what our leadership expectations are, what our academic expectations are, what our team rules are. It also talks through, it has our season cycles in there. What do our cycles look like for training for a year as we go through a cycle? It talks about our facilities. It talks about who are the greater parts of our program. So in a collegiate program, we have a strength trainer, we have a sports medicine person, we have a academic sports supervisor, we have our strength coach. We have a larger staff, and this gives you a little intro to that staff, what they're about. This is something we can share with recruits. Okay, this is also something we can share with our team. This adjusts every year. Anyone who's been in college athletics, this probably doesn't change as much in high school and club, but our academic person is different every year because someone leaves, someone new comes in. Our strength coach often changes. Someone leaves. There's a lot of intro jobs for these positions, so it changes every year, so it's important to just update our team on what's going on there. The How We Play Tactical Handbook. This is 115 pages long. Okay? I really wish I could show this to you because the entire thing was created in Google Draw. Okay, Google, you can do everything on Google for free. There's really no excuse not to create a really good plan because Google actually has the resources. There's full water polo courses drawn, 2-meter line, 5-meter line, all of the players moved exactly where we want them to be, and the entire thing was created on Google Draw. It took a long ass time to do, though. I'm not going to lie to you about that, to do each one of these drawings. Everything was handwritten by me in the beginning that we then took and we made it digital so that we could make adjustments in this. We saved all of the drawings are saved within Google. So if you decided that this O needs to be over here now instead of over here, you can go back, you can change that. You can change that in that attack and you can adjust it. This has everything. This has how we want to play on counterattack. This has how we want to play on counter defense. This has how we want to play on 6-on-5, how we want to play on 5-on-6. Do I think that my players read this all the way through? Absolutely not. 2 of them are sitting right there, and I bet you anything that they've never read every single page of that book. I can guarantee it. And they know it. They know, oh, please. Yeah, exactly. So it's extensive, and I wanted to cover everything, and it adjusts. One of the new things I've started to do this year, you're not going to use everything in that playbook every single year. So one of the new things I've done for this team this year is I've gone, okay, what are we going to use? I want to simplify this. I want to break it down. What are we going to use? And I made a 20-page one for this year's team. Here are the plays we're going to use. Here are the things we're going to do. But that mass book, that mass resource has everything. It has all of it. And it's a working document. It's constantly adjusting. But I can always go back to that document, and I should be able to find anything that we're going to work on, anything that we're going to do in that document. This might sound overwhelming to you guys, and to be honest with you, when I sat down and did it, it was overwhelming to me. It was overwhelming to me. This is not something that I enjoy doing. I like to be on the deck. I like to coach. I like to interact with the athletes. But this is something that directly benefits those athletes to sit down and do. You have to have a way that you play, right? And that can be changed. That can be ever changing. Maybe you just saw something next door when Doug was speaking, and I want to go back and I want to put this in my book. And so I take that. I go back. We need to do that. That goes in the book. Okay, the document's changed just simply by some coach's education here. The third piece there is a coach's manual. So this is a manual for my coaches, not so much about, hey, here's how you're going to coach or how you're going to teach, but what your job is throughout the year. We kind of work on a calendar schedule in college. So there's things that need to get done in September. There's things that need to get done in October, November, December, whether it be scheduling your travel, or we work on a calendar, especially because of recruiting. So this coach's manual is basically formatted, okay, in a way that every month details the jobs of what people are going to be doing. This is what the assistant 1 is going to be doing. This is what assistant 2 is going to be doing. This is what head coach is going to be doing in September, and so on and so on. And it covers all of those different areas: recruiting, scheduling, compliance, paperwork, academic, working with our academic support staff, preparing our team. It goes through all of those things. Again, tedious. The first time I did it, now it's minor changes. A rule changes, we make a minor adjustment to it. Okay, something changes, we can make that small adjustment. I think it's important that you set aside time each year to refine this template always. Okay. This has to be a way for you to become better. This is like your growth. This is also a manual for you. What did you learn? There should be something new in there every year. If there's not something new in there, did you learn anything last year? No, did you grow? Did you change? I think that's really important. And there are no financial roadblocks for creating a time. Everyone knows as we get older that there are financial roadblocks. Our time is money. Our time creates a living for our families. Our time has to be spent wisely, of course. But there's no financial roadblocks in terms of you could create a plan without it costing you extra money in terms of creating that plan. I suggest for those of you that are club administrators within club, this is a hard thing to swallow, but one of the things that we do with our club, for example, I work with SoCal. I'm not coaching actively right now, but I've been involved with the club for a lot of years, and one of the things that we do, we pay people a couple extra hours a week to write their plans. Okay? I think it's an important and it's an essential piece. Like if you're not giving people time to do that, if you're not paying them to do that and making it important from that standpoint, I think you're making a mistake. Okay, seasonal plans, calendar, right? Create a hard schedule and distribute that schedule as soon as you possibly can, right? We've got to secure facilities, right? And I think this problem exists more for other people than it does in California. And I know it exists for some of us in California, but we're not battling nearly as hard for pool time as others are. This is such an essential thing. If we want to really grow our sport and combat, we've got to be on the ball scheduling, and we've got to make sure we get a calendar out, and we've got to beat other people to scheduling the facility. We have to. Doesn't mean you're always going to get priority. I can't guarantee you that you beat the person, and there's some bureaucracy to that as well. But if you show that you're organized, that you want to get in that pool, you want to get in that area, chances are people will eventually come around to that, and they will be supportive of you. Creating an appropriate balance between competition of training. I know for a fact the club coaches that are in here, you get into like a summer, and your summer season from the time school ends for kids and mid-June or early June and goes through now late July because JOs has been pushed up, you feel like you're just playing games all the time. And you got to prepare for these competitions, but how do you prepare for these competitions? You got to create good balance as best as you can based on the schedule. Okay, I think that part is really important. And then communicate your expectations for participation. This might cause you some pain early on, right? That you might lose some players because they don't want to follow through with your expectations for participation. But eventually this is going to come back in swarms when people are like, okay, this is what's expected of us. People like to feel involved. And if you create a plan that asks more of them to be there all of the time, to feel like they're having to be engaged, it's not 2 out of 3 times a week. We train 3 times a week. You're here 3 times. This is what our expectation is. Maybe it changes throughout age group. But I think it's really important that you set that expectation for everyone. Besides just creating the plan. Yeah, you got to put the calendar down, but you got to say what you expect too. People will come up with every excuse in the book, right? When you know. The best one these days, like we didn't have to have homework when I was an athlete. Oh, I got homework. Yeah, school's so much harder these days. You know, it's the math, it's just totally different. Is it? Is the math totally different? I don't think the math is totally different. School is the same. There's still homework. You still have to study. It's still hard. It's still about managing time, okay? You just have to communicate your expectations through that. Sure, if someone's struggling, can you adjust? Can you change the plan for that person specifically? But we can't allow our plan to be disrupted because these excuses come in, and you can't allow a culture of excuses. It will affect your plan adversely, okay? It will affect your plan adversely. Substance and structure. You have to decide what you want to teach. So essentially, when we clicked on that, this was a list that I created for my players to send out to my players in 2015-16. And it was a list. It was 3 things for each phase of the game. On 6-on-5, we want to do these 3 things. On 5-on-6, we want to do these 3 things. On counterattack, we want to do these 3 things. Very simple. Without perplexing them, very simple things. My job is to go through the complex part and say, okay, how are we going to arrive to these 3 things? But I created a what. You know, what do we want to teach within this substance of the seasonal plan? The next part is the how. Okay, how do you want to organize your training blocks? Okay, I have cycles. We write down cycles. Here's what the cycles look like. I give that to the players. It's included in their book. If we were to click on the how there, it goes through my whole college season of cycles. So I have cycles starting from mid-September when we come back, and they're of varying lengths. Okay, we have rules in college where you're allowed to train 132 days in your 20-hour weeks. Okay, you are only allowed to train 8 hours in the other weeks. However, there's all kinds of different creative ways you can get around this. You can strength train as long as you're not in there. That doesn't have to count against you. The autonomy conferences, or our conference is not one, the Big West, but we have decided that we're going to take some of their rules. So there's this rule of 14 additional days off, where they have made you take 14 additional days off throughout the year to provide athletes with a more holistic experience throughout their lives, because they're going to use that time really wisely during those 14 days. So we give them this extra 14 days off, and you can be creative with that, where you fit those days in, how you extend out your training. I have gone with the same calendar that we've used for a lot of years, and I really like it. I like it where it puts us into the season. I like how it lets us kind of start walking a little bit, then we start jogging, and then we start running into the season, and how that gets us going. There are college programs that will literally go into their finals week in December, and they will stop training December 6th or 7th, and they won't come back until January 6th or 7th. That gives me anxiety. I can't give an athlete that I know is going into an NC2A Division I season a month off. I don't have the trust that they're going to make the necessary, do the necessary things to prepare themselves. So I take that into my own hands by how I schedule. okay, and what I do and the plan that I create. It's important to create weekly plans. An idea that I have for people with weekly plans, so if we have 6 workouts, I write 5. Okay, I'm an extremely ambitious practice writer. Okay, but then I'm a anal retentive drill manager. So if the drill is not going the way I want, if the fundamental is not being executed the way I want, we will continue on with that drill. If it was scheduled for 10 minutes, we may go 20, we may go 30 until we get it right. And because I do that, there's something at the end of that practice that doesn't get done. So what I do is I keep a practice at the end of the week where those things slide to, okay? And over the course of the week, it gets filled up, because I think we need to be as close to perfect in our execution of things as we can. I'm not a fan of I don't overkill the drill, but I'm not a fan either of going, okay, well, we only had 10 minutes scheduled for this. This looks awful right now. Let's just move on to the next thing, because that'll be better for sure, right? Like you have to grasp the intensity back in that moment. So I recommend doing that. I think it's a good idea, but I do think it's good to have a weekly plan. I think it's good to analyze what you did previously, whether you played games or if you're going into games, how that should affect your training and the things that you want to do when you're writing that weekly plan. I don't think it's a good idea to write ahead of a week, because you never know what's going to happen. Is somebody hurt? Maybe you thought you were doing great on 6-on-5. It looked fabulous at practice. And then you went and you played a team and you went 0 for 9. Okay? And so that changes the plan. And if you'd have written your plan 2 weeks ago, you're like, well, we don't have to work on that much 6-on-5 because we're really good at it right now. Well, that changes when you go 0 for 9 all of a sudden, and you maybe need to rethink what you're doing and what your plan is. So you don't want to get too ahead. You want to plan. You want to be ahead. The other thing is, you got to understand, and I learned this actually from one of my best friends. His name's John Spara. He coaches the men's USA volleyball team, and he coaches UCLA volleyball as well. And we were talking about practice planning one time, and he said, it takes me twice as long to write the practice plan as it does to actually have the practice and execute it if I'm on my game. It takes me twice as long. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to jot this down and I'm going to do this. And he wrote in shorthand too. He left his workouts all over the place. I couldn't understand them, but I saw what it looked like. It wasn't some extravagant drawings and everything. It was in shorthand, but the thinking about it. Here's what we're going to do. He wrote down a little bit so he remembered what it was they were going to do. And he spent time thinking about what that was going to look like, where players were going to be, how that drill was going to affect the training. And if you're not taking a lot of time planning, expect failure. Expect to go out there and be frustrated then. You got to plan to create a really good environment. I'm hoping that this works. So this, I don't know why I can't see what's on this slide. I apologize that I'm horrible with this. But one of the things is be organized. So better than me, obviously, in terms of knowing that your plan works. But I think we waste a lot of time in our sport, honestly, when I go watch youth practice specifically. If you have a 10-person shooting line at your youth practice, you are wasting time. And this is a critique I have heard when I have interacted with soccer coaches, volleyball coaches that have come out and they've been a parent or they've watched our trainings. They look at our trainings and they look at it and they go, why are all those kids sitting there right there? Why do you think why are those kids grabbing on each other in that shooting line right there? Why is that going on? Because they're waiting in their 10-person line turn to get in there. It's not a ride at Disneyland, right? Where that you think about what you're doing there. You're goofing around, you're messing around. We got to keep people active. Okay, and you got to keep moving through your program. So this is not playing either. Maybe I can get it to play. So this is a big drill right here. Okay, where we have the entire pool. I'm lucky at UCI. I've got 65 meters of pool space. We have only 2 water polo programs, so I can have all the pool that I want. Not everyone has that blessing, and I get that, but I still think, so in this particular sequence right here, we have 20 players that are all doing something at the same time. So I wrote down all these skills that I wanted to work on. We needed to work on various things, okay, and all of these players over here are working on closing out. Okay, these players over here between the cones are working on splitting between two players, how to appropriately split and gap and move between two players. These players that are at the cages, there's two different sets of cages. One set of cages, there's a blocker working on a very specific block for 5-man. There is a shooter working on a very specific shot for 5-man against that blocker. And there is a passer working on a very specific movement to pass the ball to that shooter who's shooting. Okay, there are goalies obviously in the cage taking shots. Okay, there are two players that are over here that are working on some horizontal leg movements. Okay, and all of that is taking place at once, and I'm all by myself. Okay, I'm all by myself. And you can do that. And I think we sometimes, yes, do you need to watch skills all the time and correct them? There's a time for that. But this is where, hey, we need reps of the skill. We need reps of the skill right now. Everyone's moving. The other thing that's interesting about this training that I think it's really important, I think it's important to be unpredictable. This is the day before our games. So we were playing games yesterday. And usually we come in the day before our games and it's like kind of a more relaxed walkthrough. We're going to do a shoot around. We're not going to do very much. I brought them in the morning before the games and I crushed them down with the circuit. We went through the circuit a couple times in a row. We did some swimming. They weren't probably ready for this type of workout or this to go on, and I think that's really important. I don't think it should be mundane and the same all of the time. They've got to be ready for something to be thrown at them, and I think you have to schedule that way both for yourself and for your athletes. We have the worst habit in our sport as well as very first thing you're going to do is you're going to get in and swim. I'm going to drink my coffee over here while you swim. Then after we swim, we're going to pass. Okay, then after we pass, we're going to shoot. After we shoot, we're going to do some scrimmaging or maybe some drilling. Does it have to go in that order? Does it have to? Do you have to warm up by swimming? Can we warm up with legs? Can we get right in and pass? Are you warming up your legs and your arms at the same time? Who wrote that rule book? Is that actually required? Do we actually have to do it in that order? Okay, is that for sure the way it needs to be? A lot of us were coached that way. There's no question. Most of my workouts were organized that way. But I don't think it's necessary to organize workouts that way. And again, when I first actually kind of experienced that was my national team coach, Radko Rudic, who none of you would have wanted to play for. And I remember the first time this happened, we jumped in, we did a couple laps, we got in, we started passing, we got into this counter drill. I'm all, this is great. We're just going to play water polo. This guy loves water polo. We got to the last half hour of the practice, and he lays in on his whistle. He goes, okay, we will go 20 times 200 on 230. Okay, we will begin but coach, man, practice is over at 9. It's like 8:40. Can we even finish this, in this amount of time? You will finish because you will swim fast. Okay, so and so there we went, and it was surprising, but in some ways it was, and I thought about the intelligence of it afterwards too. When does your mind start to fail? It starts to fail at the end of the practice, right? In that last half hour, and that's when you're working on your most important stuff, when your mind is failing. I didn't need anything but the ability to swim. I could be mindless at that moment and swim. Yeah, it hurt, and my mind was telling me that it hurt, but I didn't need to be focused on what my shot blocking position should be right now, what my tactical movements were supposed to be, and Doug's speech over there. Am I supposed to be doing the 21 pick right now? Am I supposed to be doing the 5 post-up? No, I'm just swimming 10 200s right now. We already worked on that a while back while my mind was really a little bit fresher and I was in the correct place. The last thing here is just, I think it's important. I do think it's important to keep it moving. And when I say keep it moving, that doesn't mean abandon a drill because you don't like what you're seeing, even though you know it's important, you don't like the execution of what you're seeing. I think that it's really important to just keep them moving throughout practice. Make it a really active practice. I love reading about Wooden's practices that they said would be an hour and a half to 2 hours at a max. And we're in the habit of our sport, man. Got to go 4 hours. We have to have these long, extensive trainings. Got to be so fit. Got to go crazy with the how much stuff we're doing. And just if you keep them moving, you can get so much done in less time when it comes to your individual training plans. No, it's going to play through. So this goes on, just so you know, I only tape it for 20 seconds, but they're doing stations where they're going a minute on, 30 seconds to change, minute on, 30 seconds to change. And they did it 3 times through. Okay, and again, you have to know what your resources are, what you can do. You got to explain it well. Also, you got to write well, right? You got to make sure that you're giving them what they need. Last slide here is, for me, I think sometimes we can be non-inventive in our sport too when it comes to practice planning. And I just talked about one thing, and that's the organization of it and how we organize our trainings and how inventive we are. The other thing is creating drills, right? I think everyone thinks, I remember I had a coach, we'd always do this thing he called the UCLA drill, where you'd throw the ball down to the 1, that person would swim down, they'd throw it across to the 5, that person would catch the ball at 5, they'd throw it up to the person in the center of the cage, and then they'd shoot. So it was like this triangle of movement and passing. And I remember one day thinking, when does this ever happen? Why am I doing the UCLA drill right now? Like, when does this happen in the current game? And I think we get caught on those types of drills sometimes, and I think you've got to create drills for what you want to do. So I put this board up here, and I put this drill on here. So I don't know how many people listened to Adam speak about 5-man yesterday. I don't know if he even got to 5-man in his speech. I know he covered a lot of area from what he told me. But we have a very specific 5-on-6 defense where the center defender follows the ball. So if the pass in this situation was to come from position 1 to the center player here, our center defender would block that side of the goal. Okay? If the pass was to come from this player to the center player, our center defender would block that side of the cage. Okay, so it's very specific depending on where the ball comes. It requires a higher level of intelligence. When we first started doing this, we had a hard time. We weren't getting enough reps. How do you get each player enough reps at center defense to make sure that this is going into their brain? Okay, so we created a shooting drill, and we said we're just going to have these 3 defenders. We're going to have 6 players in the cage. They're all going to be involved and engaged in what's going on. X4 and X5 also have important responsibilities. Those are the other 2 defensive players there, because when the center defender moves to one side, whichever top defender is on that side has the ability, they're free to move because the center defender is on that post on the opposite side. So that person has freedom to move. So we needed these people to get coordinated and to get reps doing this. And the best way to do it was to create a small drill with only those players to make sure those players were moving. Sure, does it change when there's posts, when you have to be in with the post and pushing around? Do where X1 and 3 make a difference? They do in the grand scheme of 5-on-6, but we needed to work on this skill. We needed to make sure we refined this skill, and we got it. So we created a drill. Wow, that's rocket science. I mean, look at that. Look at that drawing. I mean, can you all follow that? It's a basic drill, but it was important to the skill that we wanted to work on. We were having a hard time with our college team recently with when we were receiving pressure and there wasn't an available pass, we were getting pushed away from the goal, back to the corners of the pool everywhere because our legs were set in the wrong place. So we needed to maximize reps of a player with the ball in their hand, okay, getting pressure. How did we do that? We put people in groups of 4. We had 2 people pass the ball back and forth, and we blew a whistle. This person held onto the ball and created leverage and received pressure and held themselves in that place without being fouled for 10 seconds while the defender tried to reach for the ball and do everything to get the ball. Blew a whistle, you pass it to the other side. Now that person's repping it. And it's very tiring too. And we did this back and forth because we wanted to replicate that skill. Okay? is that, again, it's not rocket science, but it's a drill created for what we needed to work on and to get maximum reps of what we needed to work on in that situation. And that's why I think it's important to do the last thing there, which is reflect on what you're doing. How does it work? Do we need to do things? These other two things here, so that board, this is a newer board that we have this year. That board's about probably this wide and about my height. And one of the things I hate about water polo timeouts, right, is you look at these basketball guys and they can be over to their huddle in like 3 seconds. They walk over here with their big long legs into their steps. And then they get 2 minutes or a TV timeout to be over there, where we're going, hey, get over here. It takes you 15 seconds to get over here. We got a 1 minute timeout. And then you got to be back out there with 15 seconds left to get started and be in the position the referee wants to blow you in. And the really mean referees are literally just ready to blow on that whistle the moment that the clock goes. They've got the whistle ready, and they're like, I don't care if you're in the spots that you want to be. I'm going to blow this whistle right when the timeout horn. I'm the guy standing behind Adam all the time going, hey, I'm hitting with my clipboard. You got 10 seconds. You got 10 seconds. Come on, you got to get him out there. Stop talking. Stop talking. Because there's literally refs that will do that, and those are the rules. Okay, so in practice, imagine the wasted time of every time you want to go through something, you've got to bring, hey, everyone swim over here to this board. I'm going to go over this, and then everyone. So this board is awesome. It's like my dance mate. I walk it down with me, down over here to this cage. I walk through what I want at this cage. I walk it over here with me to this cage. I walk it over here. We have a real challenge in our sport. Coach K can walk right out into the middle of his defense and say, hey, you need to be right here, okay? Right here, exactly right here, and you need to defend him this way. I can't walk right out into the middle of my defense and say, hey, you. So I've got trash cans out, and I'm showing with my body position. I'm using whatever I've got on the deck to do this. I think that it's really, really important, okay, that you create every opportunity you can to try to show and do that situation. So we have all learners, okay? So if you were listening to Doug right before this, when you've done this sport as long as Doug has been a part of the sport, Doug is now an auditory learner. This is, if I was into research, I would study the transition of people once they've played a sport or been in a sport for long enough, how they become an auditory learner regardless of their learner type because they've visualized it so many times over and over again. Now they can just hear it and they can see it and they can do it. So he's talking through this sequence of plays, and I'm cracking up in the back because he's talking at 100 miles an hour, and I can follow him because I've coached with him for a bunch of years before, and I know his lingo, and I follow the game. I see the game, and I do that. Just know that a lot of your athletes, they don't have that skill yet. Okay, they need to see drawing. Okay, they need to hear it. Some of them will be able to do it by hearing it, and some of them need to walk through it. Okay, and I think a lot of times, if you do need to get into the middle of the play, so you feel like, hey, we're not getting this, I do need to get in the middle of the play, get them out onto the pool deck and walk through it. Go to the soccer field, go to the basketball court, go somewhere else and walk through it. It doesn't always have to be in the pool. This is also an awesome way. If you have 2 hours of pool time, no more, and you want all that time in the pool, make your practice 2.5 hours and do walkthroughs for a half an hour on the pool deck. Explain all your drills on land, walk through everything, utilize that time on the land. Be smart with what you're doing there. The last point that's on there that I didn't discuss is try to compete every day, right? Every day. I think we overestimate that just because someone's doing a sport that means that they're competitive. Oh, they're here, they're competitive. They want to beat people. They understand that function of the competitiveness. That is not a fact. That is not a fact. And people can arrive all the way to college having just good athleticism that allows them to do certain things, but lack basic competitive skills. Of a nature. Even national team. I mean, I'll tell you, he's back there, so I'll give him some grief. But in some of Adam's most challenging moments, where he's getting on senior team athletes, he is mostly challenging their competitiveness. It is rarely that he is challenging their ability or their tactical decisions that they're making or something like that. The majority of the time, it has to do with he feels like they're not arriving to the competitive level that they need to execute the situation. They're not getting in there. So if you don't practice it every day, if you don't do something that's competitive, it doesn't always have to be water polo. It could be a swim test. It could be a leg battle. It could be, it could be even an IQ, an IQ thing. It could be anything you want, but you got to try to compete every day in your trainings, even if it's just 5 minutes. And we all run out of time, guys, but make it a priority, I think, to have competing as part of what you're doing. That's all I got. I'm bummed that I couldn't get all those documents up there and share them. But if anyone wants to look at them, I'm happy to share them with anybody who reaches out to me. dklatt@uci.edu, dklatt@usawaterpolo.org. All of those various things. You can show them?
Yeah, maybe as Dan's wrapping up, if you guys have any questions, I can plug in and at least you can give them like a brief overview of some
great.
of the docs.
I mean, what I like to do is have a test where you can test certain things so you know how much time you need to condition. Oh, we're in bad shape right now, so we need to add a little bit more to that and later. But then I think it's also important, you might have a level you want someone to get to, but everybody's going to be at different levels. You need to kind of analyze what is this person's, are they where they need to be or should be, and as a group, are we where we need to be and go? I would say I'm like a 33%, 33%, 33%. So 33% to me is conditioning, 33% is fundamentals, and sometimes those two things cross over into one another, because if you do fundamentals really hard, it is conditioning, essentially, and then 33% is playing in that way. So he's got all my stuff up. So I'll go over the ones that I think are really important. So this is like our playbook. How do I go to the next page? Oh, I just scroll. Okay. So here's the legend, and you'll see in here, like literally, it has each one has a how we play a certain phase, and that's about a page outline that talks about how we play counter D, like what are the things I expect. And then throughout the rest of that, it has drawings and all of those things. So it has zone situations explaining what a stair step are, what relevant situations for a stair step are. It has piston zone situations, so like a two-player zone, a moving zone, what are those situations like, gapping, and then it has a bunch of very specific attacks for certain zones, and how you would attack those and how you would do those. As I told you, is tedious. This is a lot because you're doing all these drawings and you're moving pieces around and doing that stuff, but I only had to do it one time, and it's been worth it because these are things that we can go back to all of the time. I'll show you what a couple of so just getting to some of the drawings so you can see. So this is Google Draw, okay? All of this kind of stuff, all of this stuff right here, these are the counterattack ones, but all of this stuff is made on Google Draw, okay? And again, it's really worthwhile. It allows you to do pretty much anything you want. I mean, it wouldn't have to just be water polo, but I think it's a really valuable tool. This is our program book. Okay, so this is an older version of the program book, but this is kind of going through, talks about our philosophy, program principles, what are our absolutes, what's our coaching philosophy, what are our program goals. You continue through team expectations, a little bit deep. Obviously, some of those are things we all hear, but what is the deeper understanding of those things? Team dynamic things that we want to have, kind of our overview on leadership, academic policies and expectations for our team. We had, I don't know, probably at some point while these two young ladies were in school, we had like a year where we were just crap in school. And I felt like it was reflecting into our play too. We weren't maximizing our abilities. And I think you could even do this with club or high school and say, If you want to be able to practice all the time, this is where you're going to be academically. You want to be able to practice 3/4 of the time. And so wherever you finish, it starts with the 2.75 and down, but anywhere beneath that, you have certain expectations you have to fulfill. Our program, our school ones, it's like 2.25 to be in study table or not, and for our actual athletic department, which is way beneath what I want my standards to be. So we created our own for that. And then this actually has our training cycles in it. So when you write through like our training cycles, so fall session, I have cycle 1. It lasts 4 to 6 weeks, what the training breakdown is, kind of a quick overview of what that looks like. Cycle 2, non-traditional competition. We're in our 20 hours, but it's fall time. We have a couple games we play. This is what we do. Cycle 3, after those competitions, we continue to work hard and do things. We analyze our video. I know Jack's talking about video analysis next door, but we collect a lot of video during that time, mainly focus on ourselves. Video is a hard thing to do because, especially if you're in club or high school and you don't have a big staff, you're probably going to have to ask a parent to do it, and you try to have as little parent interaction as you possibly can, if possible at some times. But if someone is willing to do it, if someone raises their hands and you could say, look, I would love for you to do the video. I need you to shut up during the video and not say anything about any of the players or anything else. And I need you to just give me the video without your opinion afterwards. You can usually find someone who will actually do that. They want jobs a lot of the times to do. This is our 2 weeks off. I give 2 weeks off during Christmas, right before our season starts. That's the most I can muster within my heart. And that's the most that my anxiety can handle during that time. Then we come back afterwards. We have a competition preparation leading into our college season. We have a cycle that's a bunch of tournaments. We go to the San Diego tournament. We have our tournament. We go through all these tournaments. We play so many games in February in college. By the time you get through February in college, 50% of your season is done in the college women's season. You played 50% or more of your games at that point in like a 5-week span. It's crazy, but it's just kind of the way it is. And then you kind of get down to single games after that. We have a finals week in the middle of our season. And everyone thinks it's the worst thing ever. I think it's the best thing that's ever happened because it gives them a week to kind of step away from one another, from me, from all of this stuff. I actually invite taking that week off, even if you're like a club coach or a high school coach and you have that conflict within your training. There's just a little break away from each other, and then we come back. And it actually is great. I find that we are better when we come back than when we left in those situations. We have our conference play. We have our championship segment. Our championship segment in NC2A water polo can be 1 week or it can be 3 weeks. 1 week would be leading up into our conference tournament after we finish our conference dates, preparing. If we do well at our conference tournament, it becomes 2 weeks longer. It becomes 3 weeks. That's what you're hoping for all the time. That's not always the reality, but that's what you're hoping for. And then the last part is progression, and sometimes we do nothing after the season's over. It kind of depends what our schedule looks like. Sometimes we come back together and we talk about things. It's not listed in here. We have a little summer program that we run with our college girls for about 6 weeks that everybody's pretty invested in. So we do get to come back together even if we don't during the school year. Why did I think it was important to write all this stuff down? I think it's important to hold myself accountable to it. I think it's important to have a plan in place, and to always be able to analyze what you're doing. The other books here, we have our coaching manual. I'm not going to bore you with that. I did want to show you this team standards sheet. So this is from our 2012-2013 team, and these are all words and definitions that they decided upon to have for their values. We got this idea in, 2011. Kelly Roulon was on the national team with our team, and she bought us all a copy of Coach K's Gold Standard book, where he talked about how they created standards for his Duke program as well as with their national team Olympic program while he was coaching the men's basketball team, Olympic team. And so we took that idea and kind of ran with it on our own. I heard Doug mention next door, borrow ideas from different sports. We borrowed from a different sport and ran with it. So I think these things are important to do. And when you let them own something like this, when you let them own their own values, their own rules, they tend to hold to it a lot more than if you're just creating it and telling them that this is the way it's going to be. Sorry, go ahead.
On the standards thing, do you mentor that, or do you leave it up to them completely? What if they get too hard on themselves? Do you back it off? How do you handle that?
Yes and no. I mean, we ask, what about this? The other thing they can do is just be really vague with their things instead of being very specific about this is how, or too wordy with how they want to be. And so, yeah, we certainly mention it, but you'd be shocked by how well written and intelligent the people you are coaching. Sometimes when you watch them execute a water polo drill, you think to yourself, you have got to be the most pea-brain, but then they do something like this and you're just in awe of what they come up with and how they write it. And I think it's a really good way to just get in touch. So sure, I mentor it a little bit and kind of give them on guidance of what I think it should look like in the end product. And we do like a rough draft and a final draft and so forth. But it's a really valuable exercise.
It also depends on like the team. There were years where it was very overseen by Dan, and then there were years where it was very much team driven. I think it's the group of girls and the leadership you have at the time.
So to that point, leadership, what your leadership looks like. And I heard Jack talking about captains too. I just so everyone knows, I have not ever one single time had a team captain at UCI in 15 years. I don't name team captains. I think it limits leadership as opposed to, I actually don't think Adam would do it if we weren't forced to at the national team level. I think because I actually learned this from him more so than anybody else, that people that have the ability to lead but don't really know it in certain areas might be stymied by naming someone a captain, and some people also don't know how to manage that role. A captain, they think that they're the boss, and the captain can sometimes bang into each other, and I don't think that's the way you want it to be. So I don't think you need to feel like that's something that you necessarily have to do if you don't want to.
In any organizational structure, you have formal leaders and informal leaders. And your informal leaders are your most important. So you can designate somebody a leader. But the informal leaders are going to manage the attitude and the process more than anyone that's anointed. So when you do anoint somebody, you have to not explain informally, to little kids, but you got to explain to them, they're not the dictator of that organization. It's not their job to be the boss of it. They're there to represent a certain thing. You have to define it for them. Because you want your informal leadership to guide all the invisible things you want to have happen. And I notice your team has a couple really good informal leaders on it that they don't stand up and say, look at me, but they're the people that really guide everything despite who's assigned to go talk to the referee. I was just talking with them today. She's in the other room.
It's got to be Melissa.
Yes. Yeah. It's easy to recognize. So that's why I personally don't hand out the captain's badge either.
Yeah, and I teach a zone. I'm not telling anybody what to do either. There's a reason why I do it. To coin another term from Adam, strong, independent woman. That's our goal at UCI, is to make sure that we have strong, independent women that are leaving our program. And I want to feel like everyone has their opportunity to grow into what that is for them. Strong, independent woman is different for each one of those people. There's not a definition of this is exactly what a strong, independent woman is. It's different for McKenna, it's different for Natalie, and we want to make sure they achieve that. And I don't want anyone to feel like they're being kept from arriving to that. And not to say that you might not have a great leader who doesn't do that at all, but if you're searching to find and go, oh, you're the captain, or you're having your team vote on it, or that kind of thing, that can create real challenges sometimes. Does anybody else have any other questions?
One of the things that we've talked about extensively with our club is we share a lot of time with swimming. And so we have a lot of water polo players who are
Well, here's the hardest thing. This is a fact, guys, like it or not. We all learned how to walk and run at some point. Basketball is not forced to have track help them to make you a good basketball player. We're forced to have swimming. The truth of the matter, if you can't move well in the water, if you can't swim, then it's a challenge. So that's a required, trained, necessary skill. So I do think we want to encourage it and we want to work around it, but we also don't want to be a prisoner to it. And you have to, I don't know your specific situation, but you have to be very careful that you're not in a situation where a swim coach is telling them this is your priority, and that like you have to set boundaries for what that looks like. And you have to know, is that a person you can work with? Are the swim coaches helping you? Or are they hurting you on that other side? I'm very fortunate. My dad is a water polo and swim coach. He's been a swim coach for forever. He started coaching water polo later. He played in college. He was a world record holder in swimming. He loves swimming, but he recognizes the value of team and water polo. He actually runs a club during the summer where his kids swim in the morning and they play water polo in the afternoon. That's what they do every day. And they participate in both sports, and that's as rare as they come, because all the, it hurts your stroke, and it's, the truth of the matter is water polo is a lot of fun, and they're afraid to lose people to an activity that they might find more enjoyable and so forth. And there's nothing, I get that. Everyone wants to keep their best athletes around. So I guess to answer your question, I would have to know more specifics about how to work with that, but I think you should encourage your athletes to swim. At SoCal, the club that I work with, we have actually a swim conditioning program. So we had a little bit of that going on where the swim coaches were kind of drawing them away. And so we started our own. We hired a coach. We started an 1.5-hour swim conditioning program 5 days a week where kids can go if they're not interested in competitive swimming, but they know they need to work on the skill, they go to swim conditioning. And they work on that and it's exclusive of your water polo training. It also allows us to have the water polo portion be about water polo instead of going, dang, you're in bad shape. We're going to have to swim for an hour of our 2 hours today because we're just going to have to do that because of how you showed up. And I think that is something that everyone should consider within that program.